Greetings, Internet! We got a lot to talk about today regarding the Marvel comic book company and the interesting choices that they've recently made. They've made some pretty surprising announcements regarding some of their most beloved characters. They just released images that I'm sure everyone has seen already, featuring a previously Caucasian Captain America as an African American, and a previously male Thor as a female. Now obviously there's a lot to discuss with both characters, but today I'm going to focus on Thor, because by now if you're not comfortable with an African American being a hero, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. If you want, I could direct you to an American history textbook. Maybe that might be a good starting place. Obviously this has caused quite a stir in the comic book community. To clear up any misconceptions that people might have about this change in gender, Thor is not now a female. He did not have a sex change, he did not decide he was going to be She-Thor or anything like that. Marvel is going to go ahead with a storyline in Norse mythology in which Thor falls from grace and becomes unworthy of wielding his hammer. Therefore, a female character, brand new female character, is going to step up and take his place, wielding the hammer, and she will be known as Thor, because it is said whoever wields the hammer will have the power of Thor and they will be Thor. End of story, that's what's happening. Now, a lot of people are in a tizzy about this, and some people are on the fence about it, and I can understand that from a reader's perspective. Mulnijor is a very big responsibility, but allow me to convince you. And at the end of this video, if you are still not okay with the idea, that's fine. Let's just respectfully agree to disagree. We don't have to have a little playground comment war about it. You have your opinion, this is mine. Now, just to get some perspective, I have trolled a lot of message boards and read a couple of comments on articles about complaints that people have about these changes. And these are fans of all genders and gender identification. This is not just male comic book fans that we're talking about here. The two most common complaints I'm seeing on these message boards are, number one, Thor being female doesn't make sense within the Marvel universe. And number two, Thor being a woman doesn't make sense in Norse mythology. Those are the two most common complaints. It just flat doesn't make sense. Now, some people do make legitimate arguments for these complaints, but what I found after perusing the internet for a couple of hours is that most people complaining are just ill-informed babies who are throwing internet tantrums because Marvel has made a decision they don't care for. Let's be real. These are my counterpoints for both issues. Number one, it doesn't make sense for Thor to be a female in the Marvel universe. To that I say, why not? Just because Thor hasn't been female in the past, it's impossible for her to be female now? I really don't see why that's significant, seeing as how in the past Mulnijor has been picked up by a number of other characters in the universe, or to use a term coined by the man friend, a ton of characters have picked up the hammer before. Sometimes only for a very short time, granted, but in case you don't see that as proof, allow me to remind you of a character called Beta Ray Bill. That's right, the orange Corbinite character originally appeared in Thor number 337 in 1983. He was the first character in the Marvel Universe to wield the hammer outside of Thor, until he proved himself and got his own hammer known as Stormbreaker. So obviously, in Marvel canon, Thor is not the only person who can wield Mulnijor. If you still have a problem with this, I suggest you re-examine your values. Because obviously the only problem you have is that a female is wielding the hammer. The second complaint kind of follows the same lines, because they think that Thor being a woman completely flies in the face of Norse mythology. But according to Norse mythology, whoever wields the hammer has the power of Thor. So really the mythology is indiscriminate about gender or gender identification. Even in Norse mythology, Thor has lost the hammer a considerable amount of times. My favorite, however, has got to be in a very famous Nordic poem called, and I'm gonna give this my best shot here, Thrimskvida. Like, I know English has some really weird rules for pronunciation and that stuff, but come on. Nordic is practically hieroglyphics at this point. Just to give you a quick synopsis, basically in the poem, the giant Thrym takes Thor's hammer away from him. He steals it. This is not a situation of Thor having lost the hammer because he wasn't worthy, like it was literally stolen from him. And as ransom for the hammer, Thrym demanded that Freyja be handed over to him as his bride in its place. But Thor wasn't down for that. It wasn't right, so he was gonna make a plan to get the hammer back. So this is how they go about it, and I encourage you please to just appreciate this mental image. Thor dresses as the bride, and dresses Loki as a bridesmaid in order to attend the wedding unnoticed. This is how they're gonna throw Thrym off of their trail. And like, even at the dinner when Thor is like eating so emphatically, nom nom nom, Loki's making all of these excuses for him to Thrym. Oh, she's just so excited about getting married, she can hardly contain herself. I want to see a whole movie based on this poem with Thor and Loki in drag. As part of the wedding ceremony, Mulnijor is placed into Thor's hands, and upon that, he reveals himself to be Thor and lays Thrym out and teaches him a lesson. So in both canons and mythologies, it makes complete sense for Thor to have lost his hammer in the first place. And it doesn't discriminate at all against female characters who might wield the hammer in his place. So if you still have a problem with that, then really your problem is with just a female character, and it's not with the mythology or the canon at all. So those are some blanket issues for Thor becoming a woman in the Marvel Universe. Now I want to address some concerns from female fans who are a little weary about this decision. Based on comment complaints, the three most universal issues that female fans, both feminist and not feminist alike, seem to take with Thor being female are as following. Number one, they're not really crazy about Marvel making a buck over women's fight for equality. Number two, they're not crazy about the way that new Thor is designed. And number three, rather than see a gender-bent version of an existing male character, a lot of female fans would rather another Marvel lady get the notoriety that she deserves and the equal representation of her male colleagues. As far as Marvel making a buck off of women's equality, I understand this from a social justice perspective, because the fight towards equality is very personal to some of us, and we don't appreciate it when Hollywood or the government, or even just jerks on the internet, try to trivialize it for their own gain. But what you have to understand is while they are making a buck off representing a female in what has traditionally been a man's role, they're still representing a female in a man's role. Whether or not this is their intention, they are making a statement about a lack of discrimination when it comes to gender roles and gender identity. Marvel's gonna make money no matter what, whether it's representing females accurately or breaking their own rules, if that's what you want to call it. You can't avoid the money-making part. Personally, if you're going to make money doing something well, you might as well contribute to the world rather than detract from it, which is what I believe they've done in this case. The second issue is that many female fans have taken issue with the way new Thor is designed. This is the one I really don't understand from an aesthetic point of view, because, I mean, come on, look at her. What do we have to do in order to satiate all females about the appearance of a female character? You can't blow her breasts and her hips completely out of proportion because that's sexualizing her body and it's not fair to all women and all that good stuff. But you also can't make her look like a flat-chested 12-year-old boy because that's simply not realistic. And you are still forcing a very traditional view of how women are supposed to be lean and perfect looking. First of all, I think it's beautifully drawn. I'm not an art critic, but come on. A lot of fans are concerned that now she's just become eye candy for men, which is first of all really unfair to all male comic book fans because not all of them, hashtag not all comic book fans, drool over cleavage and seek to sexualize female characters. And I have seen other immortalizations of a female Thor that are far more risque than this one. Pretty much the only thing even remotely risque about this outfit is the little boob window down here. And that's not even that big. Lots of female fans take issue specifically with the breastplate that's featured in the sketch. For those of you who are not well endowed, simmer down for a second because I'm going to explain to you a thing. Having large breasts can be very taxing on a person. The idea that there is armor that is molded around her breasts and allows room for them is beyond practical. If in order to fight evil I had to bind my breasts with ace bandages or tape, to the point of having a mammogram, I would rather ride into battle bare-breasted like an Amazon if it meant that I was able to move and be comfortable. I would risk being shot in the chest, but at least I could maneuver well. Not to mention, iron support for a large bust would also mean a decrease in back pain, and I can tell you that from personal experience. Granted, this is all just concept art, and could change as the character and the storyline develop. But from what we're seeing right now, I really don't know what everybody is complaining about. She's beautiful, she's practical, and she's ready to kick some booty. The third issue a lot of female fans are complaining about is that rather than seeing a gender-bent version of a male character, they would rather another existing female character get more notoriety within the comic book universe. This is the issue with which I find the most merit, because let's face it, there are already a lot of great Marvel ladies who deserve more representation in the universe. Many female fans would rather see Mulnijor in the hands of Freyja, or Sif, or Valkyrie. Believe me, I understand this. We would rather that another Marvel lady get the credit that she deserves. While that's a legitimate complaint, I would encourage you personally to not look at it that way. Times are changing, folks. Female superheroines are getting more and more notoriety and are being bolstered to the level of representation as their male colleagues. Black Widow has a solo movie up on the docket for Marvel, and DC is just weeks away from announcing if we're getting a Wonder Woman movie or not. The projected date for that project has been 2017. It's baby steps, but we're gonna get there. It's not all gonna happen overnight. As far as a woman filling Thor's shoes, I really encourage you to look at the positives in the situation. If Marvel were to take a pre-existing character and give them Mulnijor, they would already have a whole backstory that could either work for or against them when it came to how they fought. It would come with preconceived notions about the character and constant comparisons between that character and Thor. By creating a new character as Thor the Goddess, comic book writers are forcing fans to reconstruct their schema for the character as they know it. Thor is always male. Thor will always be male. But now they have no choice except to accept Thor as female. Not Sif as Thor, not Valkyrie as Thor, not Freyja as Thor, but Thor as a female. Ultimately, it's going to render her gender completely irrelevant to how she deals with wielding the hammer, because she is Thor and not a female version of Thor. As intelligent adults, we know that Batman doesn't have to be female in order for little girls to enjoy Batman. But little kids aren't the same. Some are going to accept their ability to do anything a male superhero does, regardless of their own gender. Some are not, and it's because when they grow up, they see a male-dominated world of superheroes. As they grow and develop their schema for gender roles and gender identification, I think it's important for them to see a large company like Marvel acknowledging the fact that yes, Thor has been male, but a female character can also be Thor. Because kids look to media in order to understand how things work in the world outside their home. And I think it's important for them to see these kinds of choices in addition to female characters who already exist getting the appropriate amount of representation within the universe. Now, of course, this is just concept art at this point, and we don't know how this is going to go. A lot of it is going to depend on the writers and the artists and their sensitivities to female representation. Based on what we've seen so far, I'm really optimistic and excited for this. I'm interested to see what the effects will be on the comic book industry. I'll be talking more about this as the story and the artwork starts to develop, so keep watching. Obviously things are changing, and as fans that's going to throw us a little bit at first. But what I hope is that people will continue to see the potential good in this situation, and they won't completely throw Marvel Comics out the window and boycott them for the rest of their lives, just because they've decided to make changes within their own fictional universe. It's gonna be okay, guys, I promise. If you want to read the poem about Thor and Loki in drag, I've included a link in the description, along with links to my Twitter and Tumblr, which you should be sure to follow me on. Don't forget to subscribe and to keep an eye out for a video next week. Thanks for watching, guys!